Hi, and welcome to the Public Narrative Podcast. I'm your host, Jhmira Alexander, and I'm joined with my esteemed guest, colleague, neighbor, housemate, friend, Sam Spitz.
I am all of those things, except maybe esteemed. That might be the first time I've heard it, but I appreciate that.
Well, Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a Chicagoan, born and raised, grew up in the city, and I've been very fortunate for the last year and a half to be your upstairs neighbor. Mm-hmm. So it's been great. You can't see this if you're listening to a podcast, but we're in a classic Chicago 2-flat in Woodlawn, and I've been living here for about 4 years in the neighborhood. But I'm from Chicago, grew up in the city, went to Whitney Young because Chicagoans are always shouting out their high schools, and yeah, I love it here. It's been great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it has been great. It really has. I've enjoyed living in this community. I've lived in Park Manor, in Chatham. It's something about Woodlawn and the culture of Woodlawn. And we got a chance to celebrate that with our birthday celebrations at the end of June. So that was exciting. What was it like for you?
It was really fun.
Yeah.
It was a really nice moment. So Chicago is like the most segregated city in America. I think maybe Milwaukee beats us out in that once in a while. But for most of my life, I've had, I think since an early 10th birthday surprise party, I've had like this huge aversion to bringing all of my family, my friends from everywhere. I would always compartmentalize friends. Yeah. And we had such a wonderful event because for me personally, for the first time since my traumatic 10th birthday, I had everybody, all of my friends together, and they all liked each other, and I didn't get in trouble for not paying attention to anybody. It just worked out really nicely.
Yeah, so I had a very similar situation, not the traumatic 10th birthday. I don't think I've shared a birthday party since sharing a birthday party with my cousin. We are birthday twins, but we were much younger when we had birthday parties together. But the same, this was my first time welcoming folks from different parts of my world. And it took me a little while to get comfortable in that space that was built around me, but it was awkward at first, but it was everything it needed to be to celebrate a birthday, to, begin opening up even beyond some of the social distancing of the pandemic. And quite frankly, to support a community gym like Lloyd's.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was really cool. I think we ended up having people from every part of Chicago, and then my uncle, who's a executive, was there from the Netherlands. My grandma was there. She grew up she went to Nicholas Senn High School on the North Side, and so we had multi-generational. Then I had friends from the city, from public housing. I had people from high school. I had people from everywhere, and we had your family there. We had my family there. It was a really good time, and then Lloyd's, if you haven't been on 61st and Eberhard, is delicious. So that didn't hurt either. They did drinks, they did food.
Yeah,
it was a vibe.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. Just the colleagues that I had there, just incredible. I mean, folks that I partnered with in different projects in Chicago media. Your mom, of course, the very reason we even know each other. Sam's mom, Jennifer Amder Spitz, she and I are part of the Communications Chicago group, and we were on a call one day, and she, got to talking about her children, and she shouted out Sam's Instagram handle.
Shocker. My mom was bragging about her son. That's crazy. I never know.
And so I started following you, and just, full circle, got a chance to connect with you, wound up living here. And so now when I see her out, I truly do feel like family. Like your dad has had me on the Doc Talk show.
That's right.
I've met some really cool people through his network, and now we're talking with AJ about doing some work. So I really feel connected to the Spitz family. Give us a sense of your upbringing. I see this shirt you have on. People who are actually from Chicago, people who say they're from Chicago. Do you have any direct relationship to the context of that shirt?
I do, and I'm every bit as obnoxious as all the Chicagoans who wear something like this. No, I'm just teasing. I grew up in Lincoln Square, North Side. Went to Near North Montessori, which is a private Montessori school on Division, and then Whitney Young. And Whitney Young really opened the city for me, and it was a nice thing because I grew up in North Center was very working class when I was a kid. It used to be called St. Ben's Parish, so if anybody knows St. Ben's Parish, extra credit. But it was like I was at 1917 West Warner, which is like near Damon, Irving, and Lincoln. And my parents moved. My dad's an artist filmmaker. My mom works with nonprofits, so they were a young couple that moved in there in like 1987 or 88. And the whole area, by the time we moved out in 2004, the whole city was different. So it was pretty classically Chicago in that the whole area changed over, which happens everywhere across the city. But it gave me a lot in common with people that I'd meet later on. But one thing in common.
For sure. So my relationship to that shirt, I grew up in South Shore. We moved to Crete, Illinois. So if anyone's familiar, like South suburbs, just past Calumet City. But when I went away to college and folks are like, where are you from? Who knows where Crete is? So, of course, I claimed Chicago. This is actually, I've been living in Chicago as an adult for the last 7 years. And it's been interesting, like to your point of how the city has changed. I think it changes. It's like almost like cyclical in how it changes. And I know when I got back to Chicago, I had to learn it, all over again and really become a student of the city and understand, like, how could I play a part in community building and development and, connect with my passion in working with youth and nonprofits and such. So what has been like, where has your passion lied in just community building? Because everybody.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because it was that feeling when you leave a city, any city, but I think especially Chicago, and you go away for a while, you think that this place loves you, that everyone's going to remember you, that it's going to look the same, that home is home. And the genesis for my film, the housing mission and all that stuff really began when I came home after school, after college, and Chicago had not waited for me. In fact, it did not give a fuck about me. I didn't know anybody anymore. And not only did I not really know people or have my community here, but the physical landscape, the geography after the foreclosure crisis had changed dramatically. And there was a lot of, there's terms that people use for this, it was just, it felt like a big part of my past had been erased. And I was like, where did it go? So that kind of led me on a decade-long search to build the Chicago. I think that I had at Whitney Young, frankly, because that was such a beautiful community and space, and it's still one of my favorite places of all time.
So sounds like there was a gift in that shift, that it gave you a new pursuit of the city.
I think you could say that. That journey started with in a barber shop. I went and got a haircut after I'd come back from being away from school for a long time, and I didn't have a barber shop anymore. So if anybody knows,
that's so personal.
Yeah, it's a personal thing. And I was going with like a 2-3 fade, really liked my razor line. I was into that look. I was a football player. It was like really needed to be precise, and so I was a little lost trying to find it, and I wound up in a barber shop on Wilson and Broadway, and I stumbled in as a walk-in to this random shop that's no longer there, like many things. And I sat in a barber's chair and we started talking kind of about this exact thing. And it turned out that we had one really strange thing in common, and the rest is history.
No, very, very cool. So help us understand, like, what is it that you do for a living? And how have you found fulfillment in that work? And what do you do for self-care?
Wow. Okay. So I work in tech, and I try to use, that thing in common that I had with that barber was that we'd both grown up on the same street, really, in Division. I went to North Montessori, as I mentioned, on Division Street, and he grew up in the high rises at Cabrini, and North Montessori was 100%. I mean, it had turned 180 degrees. It was like a small kind of like, all the kids were like kids of artists and stuff when I was there. It became a really fancy private school. And then Cabrini was gone. And so he ended up taking me for a walk down his side of Division Street. We made a film, and it got me really involved in housing issues in Chicago. And so I was thinking at the time I was going to be an activist. I went to grad school at Oxford. I came out, it was like, I'm armed to the teeth with this degree and with all this passion to go fight for housing and do it differently. And then I realized that I had like no job. I didn't have any credit. I owed some money, and I had a history degree. So
what do you do with all that?
How do you do that? So I got into tech, and I went heavy on tech, and I used the money that I made in tech to invest in community, and that's what we have, I think, in Woodlawn. So,
No, that's very, very powerful. So, what do you do for self-care?
Oh, for self-care. In other words, what is the other part of the question that I completely missed?
No, you're fine.
Maybe I don't know. I might not have a good answer for that. I go for walks through Washington Park, and I do have a good answer for that. Every morning, I wake up and I'm either working out in Washington Park when it's warm outside. I go to East Bank Club when it's not, but when it's warm outside, like right now, I like to go for walks through Washington Park. I still think, I fundamentally believe in my heart that one of our greatest untapped or underutilized resources in Chicago are these beautiful parks. And Washington Park is the Southern Lagoon. For anybody that hasn't taken a walk through there, it's gorgeous. So I go get my coffee at Daly's on 63rd, or at Medici in Hyde Park, or at Robust on 63rd and Woodlawn, and I listen to old jazz.
Yeah, I call him Sam Coltrane. Like from time to time, I can hear him rocking out upstairs.
Should probably turn that down.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I like jazz. You know, I've heard you say that about walking around Washington Park a lot, and I walk too, like for self-care. But I like to walk along the lakefront. I don't know what it is about that trek from La Rabida to the Museum of Science and Industry and back, but it's a quick 3 miles. And I don't know, it's just really therapeutic. I think it might be being that close to the water, but I'm gonna have to check out walking around Washington Park, because I think you're right. Like lots of Chicago communities have many gyms that oftentimes are underutilized because of like the perception that is created through and by how people consume media. So is there anything that you would imagine would be told different about Woodlawn and Washington Park's own story?
Well, I think definitely. I mean, so Washington Park is also a neighborhood, so it has, but Woodlawn, for those who might not know, is adjacent to the southern end of Washington Park, from Cottage to King, or from this camera's perspective, from Cottage to King Drive, and there's all kinds of beauty. It was built originally for the World's Fair, I think in 1893, and it was the fairgrounds. So they went from Jackson Park across the Midway right down into Washington Park, and it was beautiful. And I think there's a lot of history that in Woodlawn in particular that we'll talk about. And there's more things coming to commemorate some of that history, but a lot of people don't know, like 63rd Street between Cottage and the Metra, where the end of the Green Line is, was actually I've heard some people say it was the most densely packed commercial corridor between Michigan Avenue and Denver. So it was a huge metropolis with all kinds of businesses, and people lived in houses like the one that we're in right now, business owners. So there's a lot of really great history in this neighborhood that I think people just don't know because it's been knocked down.
For sure. So it sounds like you're very well served by that history degree, although it didn't make sense initially, but it makes sense now, right?
Yeah, I think it. You know, there's two different ways to look at that. So I, in business, build evidence-based arguments all the time to persuade people to do things, or organizations to do things, and so that is definitely directly from history. But also, you know, I think having a deep understanding of the past and being in that place is meaningful. And so I love it. You know, and it adds layers of context and meaning for the places that I live in, and Woodlawn's a great example of that, for better and for worse.
Yeah. Well, for sure, you know, since our party, my family has claimed you. My cousins are like, you know, when are we doing game night? And I'm like,
you're welcome anytime.
I'm like, well, I don't know if Sam's trapped. We'll find out, like, so we can get this on the books.
I like it.
But you know, family is a huge part of, I mean, again, like how we even got to know each other. And recently you shared a story with me about this guy right here.
Yeah.
I got a chance to attend Mayor Harold Washington's centennial event celebration. And it was something about how I've heard folks talk about him, and the consistency and the continuity of his character as a leader, the impact that he made. And I could only aspire to leave that kind of legacy, you know, and that type of impression.
You, me, and the rest of us.
Help me understand the impression that he's left on you particularly.
Well, I appreciate that question because so I exist because my dad came to Chicago to make a film about Harold Washington, and out of in many ways great circumstance and chance, Mayor Washington ended up becoming like a mentor to my dad and being able to my dad could go into City Hall anytime. He made a film about Harold Washington's college years called The Roosevelt Experiment, and it was about desegregating college, because Roosevelt University was the first desegregated college in the country, and Mayor Harold Washington, eventually Mayor Harold Washington, at the time like skinny racing runner, athlete, Harold Washington was at the forefront of that. So I think, when we talk about community and building Chicago and building a better Chicago, we have a blueprint in the unity that he brought to our city. Not like the council wars, but towards kind of the end. And what it took, the Rainbow Coalition it took to elect him, I think is the best of us and a great historical reference point for anybody trying to build Chicago better.
For sure. And I mean, you mentioned the Push Coalition and their part in helping with that. I'm a part of a program with the Chicago Foundation for Women called Willie's Warriors, and it's named for Dr. Willie Burroughs, who was a champion in Mayor Washington's campaign, in addition to with Rainbow Push. Nice. And the more I learn of her and the women that I'm engaging with, I think you're right about that, building a better Chicago. It's like something about the DNA of what is truly Chicago and what connects us all. Yeah. It's like we have to find our way back to that and that connection. How do you imagine that may happen in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think that's above my pay grade, but I'm going to give it a shot. I think I think there is a Chicago identity, which I hearken on to that I think everybody's really proud of, whether you're growing up on the northwest side of Chicago, or you're growing up on the southeast side of Chicago, or you're on the southwest side or the northeast side, the Gold Coast, wherever. There's something that Chicagoans take pride in, and that's the identity of being from Chicago. And so I think right now it's difficult to see a path where people come together, but I think that the place we can come together is around, I think housing's a big space, but to be honest, it's a tough question. I like our public parks, but how do we, because the gulfs that we're bridging aren't insignificant, and I think that it takes folks intentionally building in areas together and genuinely enjoying each other and building good vibes, but I don't know that there's an answer for Chicago. I think there's an answer for our nice block here at 6100 South Vernon.
You got to start
answer
somewhere.
On Eberhart,
for sure.
But I think if people are invested in the best of Chicago and they want to build that community, then root yourselves here. Invest in the neighborhoods, improve them. And put yourself there physically. It's one thing to put money somewhere, but if you live in a place, you're a different level of stakeholder. And I think, I found that to be rewarding and challenging. But I think it's fun, to build something with people that you care about.
For sure. That it leaves a long-lasting impression and just builds on a legacy. That and I guess initially you don't set out to do, but after a few years, there's something to this. I know for me, one of the things I studied broadcasting in college. But now when I finish school, I'm done and I have this broadcasting degree, a ton of student loan debt and no interest in the journalism industry because of the kind of stories that I'd have to tell. But things came full circle to be able to lead this organization in telling the kind of stories that I want to tell and delivering the type of impact that I'm interested in. And one of my earlier influences in that was my grandmother. And I wasn't even like going through that whole path, that whole journey, how she influenced me. I always see it when I'm faced with tough stuff. Things that I can like pick up and run and go hide under a rock somewhere, or I can stand and face it and be better because of it. And it's when I find those gems that she like instilled in me as a child, not even knowing that like, you know, that's what she was doing and cultivating me as a young woman. I am so grateful for that influence, though she never got to see like the measure of that, but I know she would be proud of that. Like, who has been your biggest influence in your life?
Well, my parents, for sure. I think for me, that's an easy answer because I've got two really great parents who I think are deeply invested in Chicago and in building community here and have built a really wonderful nest, and place for themselves. So, you know, I love their community, and it was a wonderful, nurturing community that I had. But they also were so supportive of me expanding that. Whitney Young was really big for me in that way, and and just finding that Chicago is bigger than the places where we grow up in, because it's a city of 77 neighborhoods, and it used to be they were parishes, and they were like really, the neighborhoods were super insular, and they still, I think part of the best of Chicago is the diversity that those neighborhoods can bring, and the communities that can form in those. And so, the one where we're committed right now is Woodlawn, but I grew up on the north side, and I was blessed to have parents who built a really nice community up there too.
How would you define the legacy that you're building even now, like your contribution to the public narrative?
Well, I don't think I'm making much of a contribution to the public narrative more broadly. I mean, I'm a dude, but there's not a lot of attention on, and there shouldn't be, right? But I think, I think I look at it more like how do I want to, how will I be happy in Chicago, and how can I help Chicago? As well, if I'm happy, I can probably treat people fair, do nice things, treat others as I want to be treated. And my hope is that if we, if we do our block right, and we have a really great community here, others will want to do their blocks. I mean, I aspire only to, I think, to have a really nice place for us. But if others are, enjoy that and want to do that, great. All the more power.
Yes, that's the start of it, though. Like impacting the world around you. I'll be honest. Like when I got back to Chicago, I didn't know anything about public narrative. I didn't know that this place existed. I didn't know what was possible in leading a nonprofit that was focused on media literacy. I literally started with the world around me, and the more that opened up, the more I had to sit with my own character development to understand, okay, how do I want to show up in this space? What do I want to do with this opportunity? And I think the thing that I took away from it, I began being welcomed into spaces where I knew many of the people who I had access to, they would never set foot in some of those spaces. So for me, it became this opportunity to represent a community who would depend on, ultimately, and in some instances, unbeknownst to them, would depend on my voice to speak up and to, chime in and lend information and that sort of thing. And I just try to go with the flow and the ebbs and flows of it. I think perhaps the most difficult thing over the last 2 years is kind of figuring out, how do you lead when there's so much uncertainty? And the thing that I've really kind of leaned into and kind of felt at home in is just like, it's going to go however it's going to go. The one thing you can't do is retreat, but you do have to show up. And in that showing up, there's much to unfold as a result of that. Like, have you had circumstances or situations where you've had to dig deep? And what has that been like? What has that process been like for you?
Yeah, I think, I think we all go through our own trials and tribulations, and I've had plenty of failures and I'm sure more than my fair share. I think to your point, I like to think of success as this adaptation of a Maya Angelou quote. She says, success is loving yourself, loving what you do, and loving how you do it. And I think all that's true. And I just think there's one more pillar, and that's loving who you do it with. And so with this, just the housing stuff, I think as long as those four things are present, we can do wonderful things, and that's how I view it. So, when I come into, I try to be pretty self-aware, and when I feel like one of those pillars isn't there, I kind of focus on how we need to get it back, because I think those things are fulfilling, and so I'm just trying to be in a space where those 4 things are present, and I feel pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't have answers to I don't know that the answers to a better Chicago. I think that policy and that downtown has a part of that. But I think it's really incumbent on us to, as people who live here, as neighbors, as people who love each other, to bring that out and to invest in each other. And that doesn't mean that we have to stay in one part of the city. It means that we explore and get to know the city on a bigger scale.
Exactly. I've been having a lot of fun getting to know the city, as things are opening up, festivals are coming back and such. And I just marvel at how beautiful a city this is, and having the opportunity to introduce other people to the beauty of the city. My only hope is that, just in going with that whole concept of a better Chicago, my only hope is that the very vibe and feel that we feel in like navigating downtown and attending different festivals and such, like we keep that vibe throughout the year and throughout all 77 communities. And I know that might be a stretch, but each community has its own story, its own narrative, its own culture, and quite frankly, its own griots and storytellers who remember the Great Migration and, understand like the impact that Chicago has had on their families and their generations. And I think for me, just going back to our party, that was really significant to have like the closest people in my life, professional and personal, in one space. And for many of us, like the first time us seeing each other since the pandemic. So I think that we tapped into something. I remember when I saw your parents again, they were like, I'll go to any party that you and Sam throw. Like, I think that we tapped into something in just the feel and connectivity and just giving people an opportunity to, set politics aside, set agendas aside. And here we are, like-minded individuals coming together to celebrate.
Well, good music will do that anytime. And so will that food from Lloyd's. That was delicious. Shout out also to Vic Mensa who made that happen. So he came and did a really nice DJ set there, which was big. So thank you to him. And then also, we had a number of really wonderful people that chipped in to make that happen. So a lot of support. But I agree. I think like the festivals and stuff are awesome, and Chicago's got a great vibe with those. But I think we can have more block parties. You know? And if I think if there's more investment, that like I was mentioning public parks earlier, I would love to see more programming for young people in our parks. And I think if we can create a safe, happy, and a safer, happier, and healthier environment, particularly like in areas where we live, for example, people feel more comfortable bringing out the best that Chicago has to offer.
For sure. Sam, how can people connect with you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, and I'm pretty responsive to my IG DMs. So hit me up. I'm Sam Spitz. I think my IG is at Sam_Spitz, and Spitz is Spitz, so pretty easy to find.
We'll leave it in the show notes.
I like it. Leave it in the show notes. Come reach out to me. We'll hang out. Well, I'm not promising because you got such a big audience. Who knows? Could get hit by I'm just teasing. Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think this was great. I mean, thank you for doing this. I think I'm grateful to be part of it, and I love what you're doing to bring people together all across Chicago. I think it's super cool, and I hope that these connections you're making continue to bear fruit. It's great.
Yeah, prayerfully they will. Thank you. And
Thanks,
thank you for being here for the Public Narrative Podcast. I'm your host, Jhmira Alexander, and we were joined here today with Sam Spitz. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, everybody.